Welcome back. All right, tomorrow's Easter, so I want to do something fun. So, my lovely wife, she went to the dollar store, picked up some window clings. I think she did all right. So, wrote Happy Easter on the board for all you fine people on the internet. So, before all of the THG hates my team, why does he hate my team thusly? Before all those comments start, I figured let us just go ahead and bask in the reality that tomorrow is Easter. Some of these window clings do not want to stay at the top. We'll see if any of these fall off during the video. I'm hoping they don't. Fingers crossed. But if they do, we're doing it live. All right, number 32 this week on the power rankings, dropping one spot from last week. Anaheim. They know how to tank. Boy, do these Ducks know how to tank. We'll see tomorrow against the Vancouver Canucks whether or not the tankathon shall continue through Vancouver. Vancouver clinched a playoff spot tonight with a loss by the Blues, so there's not much on the line tomorrow. I'm hoping it's a fun game at least. I'm holding out some hope for that, but at least it's early, and I'll be able to do another van review, and then the rest of the day is ours to have some Easter fun and all that. So yeah, number 32 is the Anaheim Ducks, which shouldn't really surprise anybody. Number 31, moving up one spot from last week, San Jose. The San Jose Sharks, they win the game tonight against St. Louis. I was actually kind of glad they did because all I kept thinking was, if Anaheim's not last, something's wrong. Something's really wrong with how Anaheim's been playing lately. So, yeah, San Jose moves up the one spot. The Battle of California, it's this continual battle. Maybe at the end of the season, I'll look at San Jose and Anaheim and the battle they've had at the bottom of the power rankings all year, because it might be kind of entertaining to do a video on. At any rate, number 30, dropping one spot from last week, Columbus. It's not that Columbus had necessarily a worse week than they've had in previous weeks. It's that they got passed. The team that was 30th last week is not 30th this week. They've actually had a pretty good week. Columbus, on the other hand, they did get the victory tonight against Pittsburgh, but yeah, it's been a tough time for Columbus over the last little while, and so they're 30th this week on the power rankings board. Which brings us to number 29, dropping 6 spots from last week, is Seattle. They did win a couple of games, but that was against Anaheim. When they're not playing against Anaheim, it is a different story. So for Seattle, they've had a really rough month, and again, when you get past the trade deadline, some teams really fall off the pace, and so at the end of the season, we look and we go, wow, that team's nowhere near the playoffs. And this year, Seattle, that's going to be the discussion for some. I don't think they're that far off. I think it's just once it became too far of a bridge to cross in order to make the playoffs, Seattle just hasn't managed to get things done. So at any rate, they did get the wins over Anaheim, but Anaheim's 32nd. So outside of those games against Anaheim, it's been a tough time for Seattle. Number 28, same spot as last week, Arizona. So Arizona, I will say this: they're scoring goals right now. They're fun to watch. They're winning enough games to make things interesting, but again, they sit well under the 500 mark. Tonight they lose 8-5 against the Rangers, so I opted to keep them in the same spot because I felt like there was a team that deserved to be bumped up ahead of them. So, in essence, the Coyotes pass Seattle, and a team passes them as it moves up 3 spots from last week, Chicago. Yep, the Blackhawks. Chicago's playing really well, honestly. Tonight, that game against Philadelphia, Soderblom helps to steal that, but Chicago played well. They got the goals when they needed them. Their special teams, it feels like, have been getting better. And there's a good young team there, so there might be something to build on this summer for Chicago. They now sit at, I think it's 22 wins. I'm looking for the board. I don't think the board's visible to me right now from tonight's games. I think it's 22 wins. So, not too shabby. 22 wins, and then they got the 5 extra points, so 49 points altogether. I think 50 plus points in a season for Chicago is kind of a win when you consider the expectations to start the season. Number 26, moving up one spot from last week, Montreal. The Habs doing their best to play the spoiler role right now in the National Hockey League. They didn't get it done against Carolina because it's the Canes. The Canes weren't going to allow that kind of shenanigan work against them. So yeah, for Montreal, long night tonight, but Carolina's done that to plenty of other teams, and Montreal's still playing well. There's a lot to build on with Montreal. Maybe Montreal's a little closer than we think to contending. Who knows? We'll see what happens next year. If they have a good start out of the gate next year, all bets could be off. Number 25, dropping 3 spots from last week. Despite the win against the New Jersey Devils, it is too little, too late. They had the loss tonight against Toronto, and they're not making the playoffs. Buffalo's been frustrating because they'll have a good game like the one against the Devils, a good comeback victory, and then the game against Toronto happens, and it's been that kind of play, and they've played their way out of any kind of contention really for the playoffs. So Buffalo at this point in the bottom row. First time they've been in the bottom row, I think, in a while, because they were 22 last week. They were 23 the week before. Yeah, it's been at least 3 weeks since they were in the bottom row. This one egg here wants to fall right off. There, I'll move it that way. There, now it won't fall off. Trying to make sure none of these fall off, or else the whole illusion is gone, and the illusion's really important here. All right, so that's your bottom row. Usually there's not a lot of movement. This week it feels like there is. Number 24 this week, and moving up 1 spot from last week. So moving out of the bottom row is Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh tonight, of course, they lose in a shootout against the Columbus Blue Jackets. They're sitting at a couple games above NHL 500. But for Pittsburgh, their season's been done for a while. It will be very interesting to see what happens this summer. Erik Karlsson just hasn't been producing very well for them. It feels in Pittsburgh like it did with Karlsson when you had Burns and Karlsson. Karlsson really blossomed once they traded Burns. There's no way that Letang's getting traded by the Penguins. I just can't see it. So it'll be interesting to see what happens this summer with the Pittsburgh Penguins, but they move up 1 spot from last week. Number 23, dropping 2 spots from last week, and it would have been worse, but the Flames did get the win tonight against the LA Kings, which reverses a trend for them and gets them back to NHL 500. But for the Flames, yeah, their season's been done for a while as well. And with the selling off of players, it has to just do a psychological number on the team that you're going out there, you're doing your best. But it would feel like management's just handicapping your ability to make those comebacks and win those games. So for the Flames, they as well might be a team that's closer to being a playoff contender for next season than might appear right now. We'll see what kind of moves they make this summer. But the Flames do drop a couple of spots from last week. Number 22, and the fool's gold on the board is Ottawa. I mentioned it in the review. I'm going to mention it here. Ottawa's playing really well. They absolutely are. They're playing really well. They've had this winning streak going. They may very well end up with a plus 500 record NHL-wise, but I don't trust it. I don't trust it because every year it feels like it's the same thing, that they win games late in the season when they're already out of contention. Last year, they almost pushed their way into a playoff spot and then just fell short. And the expectation was this season that they could finally get off to a good start, and they didn't. So I want to see that good start. I want to see the Sens get better. They move out of the bottom row. They move up 4 spots this week. I still don't trust it. So there's that. Number 21. Also moving up 3 spots from last week, New Jersey. Now, I will say this, the Devils are better than their record. And I do think the Devils, if things had gone a little bit different this season, if a couple of moves have been made very early in the season, we would probably see them above the playoff line. And I've already heard other people on NHL Network shows or on Sportsnet, TSN, this and that, talking about how the Devils are the surprise team in the East that aren't in the playoffs. And the expectation is they're going to bounce back next season. They're going to have to fix both the blue line and the goaltending to make that happen. And again, New Jersey, they have the 2-0 lead last night, and then Buffalo scores 5 in a row. So that's the kind of thing that they have to get that out of their game. They have to have more consistency. So they do move up this week because they had a pretty good week, but the loss against Buffalo prevented them from moving up any further. Number 20, dropping 5 spots from last week. It feels like the Flyers run is done now. It feels like the Cinderella story that was the Philadelphia Flyers and all the hard work, and maybe the hard work eventually is just too much. Maybe it's hard to keep up that effort every single game, but either way, for the Philadelphia Flyers, it's been a rough week. That loss tonight against Chicago just tells me this team is in no way ready for the playoffs. This team is likely to back out of the playoffs. Probably does gift a spot for the Detroit Red Wings. Of the teams below the line, Detroit's right there. Probably gets them a spot. And I would say that with how the two teams are playing, Detroit could probably give a team a tougher time of it in the first round than Philadelphia would. Number 19, same spot as last week. They seem to like it here. Minnesota's been number 19 for 3 weeks in a row. They win enough games to stay ahead of these teams. They lose enough games not to move up. So today it was a game effort, but they pulled the goalie in the overtime. It doesn't work the way it did in the other game where they pulled the goalie in the overtime. So for Minnesota, the fairy tale story, the little engine that could story for them is just it's not going to happen for them this year. So the Minnesota Wild are facing an interesting offseason themselves. And obviously once the season's done, I do get into looking at the rosters before we get into July the 1st and what could happen and what could change during the summer. And it'll be interesting once I get into Minnesota to really dig into that. Number 18, moving up 2 spots from last week, Detroit. So I will say this, they got the point against Florida. Would you like 2 points? Absolutely. Yep, you would like to have 2 points. The good news for them, Philadelphia just keeps losing. So if Detroit can get enough points, they're in the playoffs. That's how it works. And I do think they have a chance. For the Detroit Red Wings, we'll see. They have Patrick Kane. They have decent enough goaltending. Lyon's been good in the playoffs before. We'll see what happens here. Number 17, moving up 1 spot from last week, the New York Islanders. They lost. They had a game effort tonight, I thought, against Tampa. I thought they gave Tampa a good run for their money, especially in that second period. Not a great first period. But the interesting thing for me with the Islanders, too, is it feels like right now Varlamov's the better of the 2 goaltenders, which I don't think any of us expected coming into the season. But yeah, for the New York Islanders, I don't think they make the playoffs. I think they're playing a little bit better than Detroit right now. That's why I have them situated the way I do. But Detroit's the one that's probably going to end up finishing above the playoff line. It's kind of too bad because if the Islanders got in, they could be a tough out. They could be tough in a 7-game series. I think that they're a team that definitely their game is more geared towards a best of 7 against one squad than an 82-game schedule where you're against a different team every night. So we move into the top half of the board. No arguments yet? Of course there are. It's the internet. Number 16, moving up 1 spot from last week, St. Louis. And it pains me to move St. Louis up 1 spot. But I couldn't figure out which of the teams in the bottom 16 I was going to have ahead of St. Louis. St. Louis loses a game tonight at home against San Jose 4-0. But they had a relatively good week before that. They won the game against Calgary, for instance. So yeah, I came out of tonight thinking, well, it's not going to be Detroit. They're not moving up 4 spots. It's not going to be the Islanders. The Islanders aren't moving up 2 spots. Not going to be Minnesota, Philly, New Jersey. I can't justify moving Ottawa up that much. So, yeah, St. Louis stays in 16th. But today's results, the combination of everything means St. Louis likely to be on the outside looking into the playoffs for the 2nd straight year. And there's definitely questions to be answered there as well. Number 15, dropping 6 spots from last week. Winnipeg. So, yes, if you feel like Winnipeg is in free fall, you're not wrong. The Winnipeg Jets held off the free fall till later in the season this year than last year. But if they end up finishing 3rd in the division, and especially if they end up playing in Denver for Game 1, I don't know that anybody's going to take the Jets to win that series. And if the Jets lose in the first round this year, it's a wasted year. And it'll be an absolute shame if that's the case, because I think the team's better than their current play has been. So we'll see if they can turn things around. Tonight's game against Ottawa was not encouraging, but there's still enough games left for them to get themselves in order. I just don't see them beating either Colorado or Dallas in a playoff series right now. And if Nashville were to pass them, and Nashville got kind of lit up a couple of times this week, but if Nashville passed them, I couldn't see them necessarily beating a division winner either. So I don't know what's going to happen with Winnipeg from here. Number 14, dropping 2 spots from last week. And it's interesting because I did see LA play. LA won the game that I watched against Vancouver. And then Edmonton made it look easy. Calgary didn't make it look easy, but Calgary showed, as teams have this year, score first against the LA Kings. If you do not want to be stuck in this defensive malaise that they tend to pull out there, score first. Make them open up their game a little bit. Put them in a situation where they're not comfortable, and the Kings can be beaten. So the LA Kings right now sit as the number 2 wild card in the West. As the playoffs sit, they would play Dallas in the first round. Dallas knows how to beat the LA Kings. So We'll see if LA has a strong week. LA does not want to finish in that second wildcard spot and play Dallas. And if Dallas were to lose the division, that'd mean probably Colorado. So I don't think LA wants Colorado either. So we'll see what happens from here, but LA drops a couple of spots this week. Number 13, moving up 3 spots from last week, the Washington Capitals. They lose in a shootout tonight against Boston, but again, Washington's interesting. They're winning enough games that they keep moving up, but they get shelled at times, right? So they get shelled by Toronto again. Toronto knows how to play Washington. So in the event that at some point in time in the playoffs, Toronto were to play Washington, I'd like Toronto's chances. The problem is that's not really an option for them right now, is it? So the Capitals are a fascinating squad. They're going to make the playoffs. It will be very interesting to see with them in the playoffs how, again, for these teams that are playing this new version of the trap, how it works in the playoffs and whether or not this ends up spreading to other teams as well. Because there's a lot of them now that low event hockey, it's the trap. You can call it low event hockey. It's the trap. And the Capitals might be playing it the best right now of the teams that play that style of hockey. At number 12, moving up 2 spots from last week, the Vegas Golden Knights. And I say the best only because Boston doesn't always play the trap. But Vegas moves up a couple of spots from last week to 12th. They're playing well, which is going to frustrate anybody who's not a Vegas fan, because that's generally how that works. Either you're a Vegas fan or you do not like Vegas at all. I don't think there's any in between. It doesn't feel like there's any in between. Personally, I'm mostly on the fence when it comes to Vegas, but there are times where I get frustrated. Like, no, they were losing this game. What just happened? But for the Vegas Golden Knights, they win some games this week. They're playing quite well. They're now 3rd spot in their division. They're not necessarily that far out when it comes to first place in the division. It's highly unlikely, but could it happen? I'm pretty sure Vegas and Vancouver play each other at least once down the stretch. Is it twice? Right? So at any rate, Vegas is still in the mix for potentially moving up further if they want to. Number 11, dropping 4 spots from last week, is the Vancouver Canucks. Pedestrian play from them. And I understand that the play gets more difficult. I have never said that I felt like the Canucks were, they're clearly a Stanley Cup contender, best team, yada, yada, yada. I understand this is the first year they've been in the spot. This is the first time that Vancouver's been like towards the top of a division, potentially a home team in a first round in a long time. So these players are not accustomed to this. I know that sounds like an excuse, but it does happen where a team is in a position maybe they're not all that familiar with, and teams play you a little bit tougher, and you got to adjust. So the Canucks have to figure this out. They have to adjust. I think tomorrow's game against Anaheim could be telling. If it's a tough game, if they can't get the win easily, if it goes to overtime, if it's a 2-1 game, then there's still reason for concern. And if they lose it, well, then that concern turns into panic, doesn't it? I may need to do another panic index this week. But yeah, Vancouver drops out of the top 10 this week. Number 10, moving up 3 spots from last week. This is 3 fingers. Tampa Bay. The Tampa Bay Lightning playing well at just the right time. It will be interesting to see because they have 2 games left against the Toronto Maple Leafs, if they win those, they may very well end up finishing 3rd in the division. And Florida's not out of the woods yet. They could end up being 2nd in the division. So we could get the Battle of Florida in the first round. Sign me up. I would absolutely love that. That'd be great. At any rate, Tampa Bay Lightning are back in the top 10, meaning we're getting ready for the playoffs. So we have 1 team left that's not in the top row. At number 9 this week, dropping 3 spots from last week, the Toronto Maple Leafs. It's not that Toronto's playing badly necessarily, just that I felt like the teams that are in the top row are the 8 teams that are playing the best hockey right now. Did he just fall? I think he did. Didn't he? Don't fall over, little guy. But yeah, Toronto, we'll see how it works with them in the playoffs as well. Again, there's only 4 points separating them and Tampa Bay for that 3rd playoff spot in the Atlantic. So very, very interesting. Could be a very telling week we have coming up. Number 8, moving up 3 spots from last week. I thought they had a good week. Boston. The Boston Bruins move into the top row. And again, I thought they had a really strong week. I do like the way that they're playing as the Bruins, understanding that it's that same stifling defensive style of hockey for the most part. A little bit more wide open with Boston, it feels like, because there's the Pasternak effect, right? So, like last year with Minnesota, when they played, it was mostly boring to watch. but then Kaprizov's line to get out there and it's kind of exciting. And Boston kind of has that with the Pastrnak line, where it's kind of boring most of the time, but then the Pastrnak line goes out there, and then there's chances, and there's some excitement. So Boston moves back into the top row. They're 8th this week. Number 7, moving up one spot from last week, the Edmonton Oilers. The Oilers could very well still end up finishing first in the division. They're right in the mix for that. The one thing I do wonder about the Oilers, and this is a conversation we'll probably have going into the playoffs, with how strong a run they've been on since the coach took over, could they run out of gas in the playoffs? Could we see them run out of gas in the playoffs? It's happened where teams have this incredible run going and then the playoffs roll around and it's gone. It's done. So we'll see what happens with the Oilers come playoff time. But yeah, they're playing really well, firing in all cylinders. Hyman with his 52nd goal tonight. And kudos to everybody on that team for playing really well, especially Warren Foegele. More shout outs to Warren Foegele should be given by everybody who watches hockey, because Fogel's had a great year. Number 6, dropping 2 spots from last week, Florida. I'm not as worried about Florida as Florida fans seem to be. It's Florida. Florida, like, they were limping along most of last season, and then they rallied at the end of the year to make the playoffs, and then they go all the way to the final. This year they had an incredible run going. Now they've been kind of limping along. I don't buy it. I think playoff time they'll be absolutely fine. I think they'll be one of the more dangerous teams to play in the first round of the playoffs. And we may look back at this and go, hey, they were pacing themselves. That was really smart. They saved their energy, and then it all showed up in the playoffs, and they wiped out their opponent in 4 straight. So we'll see what happens with Florida come playoff time, but at any rate, I do think they're playing quite well. Number 5, same spot as last week, Nashville. I have Nashville in the same spot because of this. The Arizona game, they ran out of gas. So that was a tough loss for them. And then tonight they lose against Colorado. But that's the Avs. The Avs have been playing some of the best hockey in the National Hockey League, and they had a lead on the Avs. I do think that there's some exhaustion that's kicked in with Nashville. I think they need to do a little bit of a reset. If they do, they can start winning again. If they don't start winning again, they start dropping down these rankings next week. If they play next week like this week, if they have a record like that, they probably find themselves out of the top row. But for this week, I left them in the same spot because I'm like, you know what? Yeah, Arizona beat them, but it just looked like they ran out of gas. So I'm giving them benefit of the doubt for this week. Number 4, moving up 6 spots from last week, Dallas. Dallas is finally playing a consistent game, and they're playing their game. Smart defense. Exciting in transition. Really good goaltending. Ottinger has his game together. They're not playing down to bad teams. They're playing well against the good teams. I'm impressed with Dallas right now. I think that the Stars, maybe they're going to go on a bit of a run in the playoffs. I don't want to go any further than that. I don't want to jinx nothing. I don't. I'm not superstitious. Right. With hockey, I am. With almost anything else, I'm not. But with hockey, yeah, there's superstitions. And one of my superstitions is don't you dare crow about one of your favorite teams, because you remember what happened, right? And yeah, anytime that happens, teams I cheer for just lose. They're done. But Dallas, I think, is playing some really strong hockey right now. That game against Seattle, they gave them nothing. The game against San Jose, there were some cracks here and there, but they handled that game. And against Vancouver, they played a darn near flawless game against Vancouver. So, yeah, Dallas is playing quite well. Number 3, same spot as last week, Carolina. The Canes, of course, get the shutout victory against Montreal. They're still sitting behind the New York Rangers, who have not shown up on the board yet. I'm telling you, that egg wants to fall right off of there. You just move it. There we go. None of them have fallen yet. I don't have wood to knock on other than this, and I don't want to make the camera shake. Anyways, Carolina, number 3 this week. I think that the acquisition of Jake Gensel looks brilliant right now. And, yeah, I'm excited to see what he does for them in the playoffs. I think they're going to get goals in this year's playoffs. And that's really been the question mark, is will the offense show up when they need it to? So, yeah, Carolina, I think there's a reason to be excited if you're a Canes fan right now. Number 2, same mark as last week for them, and that's Colorado. So their winning streak got snapped, but they're still playing really well. The game against Nashville was kind of ugly, but when Annunen takes over and he doesn't allow another goal, are we experiencing maybe a bit of, I don't want to say a goaltending controversy, but I just did. So Is Annunen out playing Georgiev? Could we see the backup become the starter in the playoffs? I don't mean for game one. I just mean that if the Avs have any struggle at all, I don't think Coach Bednar is going to have any problem with putting the backup in and saying he's our guy right now, and giving Georgiev some rest, right? Which would just stay restful if Annunen continues to play well. So Colorado, that was an unexpected development because they picked up Prosvetov on waivers early in the season, in part because they probably didn't figure Annunen was ready. Now he is. Now he's good to go. So yeah, the Avs are number 2, which brings us to number 1. And for at least the third straight week, and I think it is the third straight week for them, it's the Rangers. So early in the season, the New York Rangers were number 1 a lot. Now we're towards the end of the season. The New York Rangers are number 1 yet again. They sit first overall in the National Hockey League as well, so it all adds up. And they've won, 20 out of 24 or something like that, or 20 out of 25. It has been a remarkable run, and they're the first team to 50 wins in the National Hockey League this year. So not too shabby of a run for the New York Rangers, who come playoff time, we'll see how it works out for them. But they have 2 goaltenders they have faith in. They can score goals by the bunches. They can play any kind of hockey you want. Whatever you bring, they can play. So we'll see how things go come playoff time, but maybe for the first time in 30 years, the Stanley Cup will get awarded in MSG to the Rangers. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe in the event that you have not done so already. For people looking for the puck board, yes, it'll return next week. I couldn't figure a way to make the window clings work with a board made of wood. I don't think that's going to work. At least this. It's got that kind of shiny finish and magnetized and all that, and it works. But there you go. Let me know your thoughts. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I hope you have a wonderful Easter weekend. Don't eat too much of the turkey if you have turkey. I don't know if everybody has turkey dinner. I always had turkey dinner growing up at Easter. In fact, I had it for Thanksgiving, New Year's, Christmas, and Easter. And what I found out as an adult is most people don't have New Year's dinner. All right, well, we did. But anyways, there you go. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.